Hello. Is it showtime? It's showtime. Are we live? We are live. It's not Memorex, however. Welcome to Journey of an Aesthete podcast, and I want to immediately ask our wonderful producer, Laurie Strickland, and her trusted companion and colleague, Chester. Yes, the sound. Thank you. It's important. I recorded just yesterday, I recorded a show with a guest who's a local. We're going to do a lot of episodes upcoming in the year, etc., with some local people, local, not just artists, but business owners in this. And there was tiny little bit of distortion in the recording, which is okay, because the subject matter was actually records and imperfections sometimes in the sound of vinyl and record albums. And so it was interesting to reflect upon that. Totally off topic from today's show, but yes, this is Journey of an Aesthete podcast. I'm your host, MitchHampton, and we are on episode 5 of kind of a long series I'm doing on Romanticism. Romanticism from the perspective largely Isaiah Berlin and his theory of what Romanticism is and its effects on art, culture, society. And today we're going to do a little bit of a dive into Berlin's extraordinary intellectual learning knowledge, his year edition. That's not all we're going to do. We're also going to explore the man as a letter writer, correspondence. The art of correspondence, of course, I don't think will ever die if only humans exist. But there was a time in the 20th century and early 20th century, and I should say I'm not exactly an anti-email person. I'm neither really for it per se either, but rereading some of these letters from Isaiah Berlin to, say, Jacqueline Kennedy or Big George McBundy and Charles Taylor and all the different people he writes to, Isaac Stern, Nicholas Nabokov, really illustrious people he's writing to here. It occurs to me that email did open up a little bit the possibility of writing kind of long and involved messages to other people. But, the art of letter writing is something, letters can take different forms. So we're going to set the stage here. This is in fact, Berlin's correspondence was so voluminous and extensive that there are 3 books like this, of this size. Look at all those, look at your host's research here into this, all those markings. This is the 60s and 70s. The third book is the 80s into the 90s, and he died in the 90s. The first book, of course, is the 20s. But we're going to concentrate, of course, on the period in which he developed his concept of Romanticism. Why not? Why not see what the man was thinking when he gave these lectures in those years, in that time period? And so we're going to set the stage. We're going to start. Where we pick up here is, I'm going to get out my glasses, trusty glasses. Oh, everything's much clearer now. Can see for a change. Henry Hardy. Henry Hardy's a wonderful scholar, archivist, and thinker, and he has been in charge of a lot of the Berlin Library, and he edited all these and compiled all these. So I'm going to read from Henry Hardy because he sets the stage. So we're in the fall of 1962, and of all places, Isaiah Berlin is going to go to Harvard University. He's going to leave his beloved London, England, and leave Oxford University, which he did love. And it says, why? Well, he's going to do a sabbatical. The title of his sabbatical, he was, in 62 anyway, the Ford Visiting Research Professor, all caps, Ford Research Visiting Professor. And he is working on the text of what eventually became three critics of the Enlightenment. Three critics of the Enlightenment. Vico, that's Gian Battista Vico, the great Italian, historian, poet, theologian, taught rhetoric in Italy. George Hayman, and George Herder. So two Germans, Herder, the two H's, I always mix these up, I shouldn't, but Hayman, Herder, and Vico could be, it's not a law firm, but it's two Germans, two Prussians, and an Italian. And he gave these lectures to many places. He gave them to Yale University under the auspices of the law school. And this is in Berlin's words. Berlin says, "These were attended far beyond my expectations and perhaps beyond the merits of the lectures themselves." Now, that's one of the things I love about Berlin. One of the aspects of what I would call traditional prose or traditional writing, whether it's correspondence of a personal nature or notes like that, is there's certain rhetorical gestures that are communicating certain things. In that case, it's self-deprecation, humility. He says, all these people came to my talk, more than probably deserve to be there. It's a way of sort of, and that's something you do in writing to put your audience or interlocutor, or whoever the case may be, at ease. So the question isn't so much whether it's true or false or whether you're being honest or not. That's never, it's certainly, I'm not saying that plays no role, but that's secondary consideration. Again, this is a very unromantic view, right, of things. It's very, the way I'm talking about writing, it's more classical, it's more traditional. It's not about the authentic expression of, I think I'm the greatest person around. I'm going to let you know that. I'm not going to feign humility. No. Beyond the merits of the lectures, but actually there's a lot of doubts. In all these letters, Berlin was very troubled, actually, as a thinker about his theory. And he went back and forth on it, and he wrestled with it late into the night. But I want you to think about another aspect of Berlin. Berlin, not only did he read all these folks, he read them in the original languages. So, he reads German, he reads Russian, he reads English. I would imagine, aside from Hebrew studies and his Jewish roots, I'd imagine he was a Greek and Latin, read in Greek and Latin. This was, again, we're painting a world, this is a world, the world in which Isaiah Berlin ensconces is a world that values highly arts and letters, and it values excellence and intellectual achievement. It just does, and there's a lot of things that go along with that. There's no, attitude of, this isn't important, or I should really be doing something else. There's an utter commitment to mastering, whoever they thought the great thinkers were, the great writers, and that's why they know all of it. Anyhow, I've said too much about that, perhaps, but he also, it said he had no special obligations at Harvard. He's going there, but he has no obligations, but he gave a seminar at the Russian Research Center in Harvard, a public lecture under the auspices of the government department. And he addressed student societies. Think about all this guy's doing. He's leaving London, he's going to the United States, he's staying at the Lowell House. Actually, Lowell House was quite close to where I used to go once a week. And when I lived in Boston, so I could go by the residence where Isaiah Berlin was staying. He also taught seminars in addition to Yale, Princeton, Columbia, Cornell, Indiana, Illinois, and Brown, largely, and this is in Berlin's words, for the purposes of meeting scholars in my own field. On all these occasions, I cannot deny that I delivered public lectures, for it seemed indecent to refuse to do so. Love that phrase. Indecent to do. So I wouldn't think of not giving these lectures because it would be indecent to not give them. This is the style I'm talking about. It's the style of it's a mindset. Okay. It would have been indecent to refuse to do so in view of the extreme scarcity of lecturers and the history of ideas. So it's a triple meaning. He says it would be bad to not lecture, indecent to do so, but considering there's so few lecturers So what he's saying is that there's not many people doing what I'm doing. And it does raise an interesting question, doesn't it? Because intellectual history, not sociology, intellectual history, history of ideas has actually always been a rather small field of study. I should say, had I not gone into music and doing this, composing, I was very tempted to probably get a degree in history of ideas. It interested me. I certainly used to go to seminars in U.S. intellectual history, and actually as a side hobby, I read all the intellectual historians, Corey Robin, Lorna Burnett, there's names that come to mind, Samuel Moyne, who I'm going to be talking about when I discuss politics next month. Any event, so this is something that's always interested me. So, you get the picture. He's saying they don't have enough lecturers, so that's why I'm there. It's also another more self-deprecation, right? It's only because they need somebody, right? They need me there. Doesn't mean it's good. It also says this was his first prolonged absence from Aileen, his wife, his beloved wife, Isaiah Berlin. And you can see good pictures of the two of them. We'll get to that. So he never been away from his wife. It says, this is Henry Hardy's commentary, it provided an unwelcome reminder of his bachelor days. He did not like being a bachelor, Berlin. In fact, there's letters said that he didn't, I think he really was eager to get married and settle down. He didn't like the loneliness of it, I guess, I think. Everybody's different. How they respond to situations or what they want. And he stayed in Lowell House, and it says Lowell House, a homely undergraduate residence. So he's living with these undergraduates, this Isaiah Berlin. And he had already visited there in 1949, January. Isn't that interesting? He'd already been there. But what do you think Berlin loves the most? Not only being at Harvard, which I have to say is a really just breathtaking institution on so many levels. And of course it has flaws. What place doesn't? But Harvard, it's being at Widener Library. And he mentioned that. And Widener Library is one of the greatest libraries in the world, not just in the U.S. So I can see. I've been to Widener. I used to go to Widener Library at Harvard University when I was studying humor writing, which I did in 1989 from a dude one of the people that wrote for National Lampoon, not a big name. That's another story for another time. And I also studied their creative writing class, wonderful creative writing class, where we read Tilly Olson and John Cheever and Dorothy Allison. Have we read Bastard Out of Carolina? I don't think so. That was published later, so it was before that. But we read some interesting women authors in that time of my life. So I'm going to read some of Berlin writing to his wife. He missed Aileen terribly, and she joined him in America in the first week of November, and they returned to England together in late January. So he goes in September, fall, goes to Harvard, stays there. His wife joins him, and then they go back to England. Dear old England, right, is what you would say. So, to Aileen Berlin. This is September 1962, so we're in the 60s. This is the era of Mad Men, the TV show. Of the great film Dr. Strangelove by Kubrick. Of many things. Early 60s. Okay. Folk music. John Coltrane. Miles Davis. This is 62. All right, enough of that. Darling Aileen, dearest Aileen. So he says both. Darling and dearest. Darling, common, dearest. People used to do that when they wrote, they would say dearest. This is a lot. I mean, I want people to start writing letters to each other like this. I really do. Not, I mean, they Not only to loved ones, by the way, too, because there's letters in here where he says, not quite, he doesn't, of course, go that far, but he'll say similar things when he's writing Charles Taylor or writing Isaac Stern, the violinist. And there's a letter here to Sir George Schulte, the conductor of the Chicago Symphony. So it's, there's something to it. Anyway. I am not so miserable as I was, but not tremendously happy either. Best begin chronologically. The flight was perfect. The object trembled a little here and there. As soon as the faintest tremors began, one was told to fasten one's seatbelt. It used to pass, 30 or 40 seconds. Even I could not mind it. I guess he's talking about turbulence. I don't know. Not clearly. We arrived punctually. I went immediately to the Coop, the great store in Harvard Square, the Coop. I used to go to the Coop, buy sweatshirts there, buy textbooks, the Coop. Ordered goods, came back to my room, horror. A regulation Oxford undergraduate bedroom and shower. No bathroom. Shower, WC, wash basin. I know they cannot afford to give me much for $350 for 4 months. It's $350 for 4 months in 62, okay. But I suddenly felt terribly depressed. It was worse than 1951 and 1953 and like 1949. Still, I am determined to work. Remember, he has to write this text on these three major thinkers, Vico, Heyman, and Herder, and that text will form the basis of these Romanticism lectures. So you're getting the reflections of somebody at the very beginning of what we started this series with, and the roots of Romanticism. So you're seeing, it's interesting, right? So he has work to do, right? Has work to do. Determined to work. I have never in my life before had such acute and violent longings to be with anyone as I have now with you. It is not just the old images, though there are plenty of them too haunting me whenever I sit alone in my nice hard wooden chair, good for one's back. I love you to a degree that it is absurd to suggest can be discovered in any literature, however marvelous, or through the words of others. So late in life, exclamation point. So late in life, exclamation point. So physical and moral and total in one. It is grotesque. Grotesque is italicized. And you drink your coffee here. With so little time, grotesque, with so little time really to separate, even if there are, it's a complex letter, there's like parentheses and R question mark, A-R-E, work and children and this and that, colon. I'll stick this through just to show, God knows whom or why, that I can work. Can is italicized. That I can work. Your telegram just arrived. Yes, I should go home. It is not an unreasonable suggestion, but I won't. I should be too ashamed. My room looks nicer. I have bought a kettle, flat stove, 3 tumblers, 3 cups, 3 spoons, scales, a shaver, and an electric shoe shine box. Do you folks know what this stuff is? So there's a letter later on where he discusses all the devices with which he's very enormously fascinated. And he talks about a coffee maker. He writes in the letter to Aileen, I think, they have this thing now called a coffee maker, and you can actually put he goes on like it's, to him, it's like the greatest thing ever invented, As we used to say, the greatest thing since sliced bread. And devices, electric shoe shine box. A pewter water jug, I rejected in the end, but I had television, radio, dictaphone, half a secretary next week. No visitors! Exclamation point. No visitors. I sit, cough. I have 99 too, and she'll soon have the flu. Don't mind. He's a hypochondriac. He said, I'm going to soon have the flu. Don't mind. The old problem is how to get fed. I think it is soluble. So he says, I'm going to get the food, but flu. But when I get the flu, because I will have chicken soup, it will cure me. He's already mapped out his whole life. I just have to laugh. I don't know. It's just, to me, this is funny. The sense of humor, is, I don't know. I think it's funny. I must stop now for a moment. The man at the door has asked me to go to a tutors meeting. Oh, well, that's part of one letter. I just want to get you to say so. A lot happens while he's at Harvard. While he's at Harvard, well, for one thing, the Cuban Missile Crisis occurs. And he responds to that. Not only does he respond to that, he actually records the response of the students that he's around and other people. Isaiah Berlin's an interesting figure because he was close to many people across the ideological spectrum. I mean, from a contemporary point of view, it was not that diverse because he had nothing to do with what we would now call conservatives. So when I say across the political spectrum, I mean good New Deal liberals and communists and Marxists and anarchists, that kind of spectrum. So, center left to far left. He doesn't. There's interesting letters here where he goes on and on about the attacking Goldwater, how dangerous Goldwater is, and hopes he doesn't get elected and all that. There's a lot of that in these letters to people. But, generally, he knows people. So the reason why I say that is that he would have known people that would have been pro-Cuba. And in some of these letters, he's castigating them. They're not a democracy. They're not free. It's awful over there. And he's talking to Marxist-Leninists, who want to make it go of it and probably have a Che Guevara poster in their office. So differences of opinion, So let's go to another letter here. This is also to Isaiah Berlin. September 26th. Lowell House, Harvard. Darling Aileen, I sit surrounded by my electric gadgets. I just talked about the gadgets. Radio, telly, shoe shiner, teapot, coffee pot, immersion plugs, etc. And I'm subject to homesickness. Last night with the Hammonds, a lot of enthusiasm about you. He is very shocked at Charlie Chaplin's degree. Charlie Chaplin got an honorary degree, and Berlin was one of the people helping that happen. But there were many detractors, I guess because of Chaplin's communist past and even Stalinist associations, We're in the period of McCarthyism still is held over, even though in the 60s and the Cold War. And Berlin says, I detest his communism, but again, he's an aesthete in a way. He's a genius at comedy. That's all that matters. We're concerned with Chaplin the filmmaker. We're not concerned with whether he supported Papa Joe Stalin or not, or even his personal life, which we can talk about Chaplin another. Although Robert Downey Jr. did a wonderful. I want to go down to Chaplin rabbit hole with that. Any event, yeah, honor you agree to Charlie Chaplin. Nobody is interested in me here. He says nobody's interested in me. It is rather delicious to not be lionized, believe me. But my telephone does not ring. And it is I who have to reflect, shall I see Jacobson, Mrs. Pickman, etc. or not? The answer is not. I feel not at all happy, of course, on this desert island. But neither am I acutely miserable. I force myself to work, which of course I dislike. And between think of nothing but you, before marriage, even in 1955 perhaps, I own myself much more. I own myself much more. Wanted to and could give myself to others. Now this is totally different. I am on leave. All I have and am is elsewhere. And I perform mechanically here. I don't mind if I am happy or miserable, please or offend, do well or not. I don't mind. It is like a kind of conscription. It has to be done. But there is no question, no is italicized, there is no question of its being one's own activity. I'm going to interject here just a quick close reading of his letter. So it's very interesting, his mindset in this letter. He doesn't like the work. If you recall the letter before, he's proud of his work in a way, and he's looking forward to it. Now he doesn't like it. But he says it has to be done, like conscription. It is compulsory and routine, and real life is elsewhere. Funny. I used to be where my body was geographically. This diversion of body and feeling, physical process and real personality is queer. How much more can one love? Isaiah, as he says to his wife, how much more can one love? He wants to be with her, of course, and that's the thing there. This is beautiful, beautiful stuff. So let's get into some of his discussion of current events, aesthetics, politics. I am going to read extensively in this episode from his letter to Charles Taylor. Now, why am I doing that? Well, Charles Taylor is now, he's getting on in years. Charles Taylor is one of our biggest, so in episodes in the past, I mentioned Bernard Williams, who wrote about Diderot and Rameau's nephew. By the way, in these letters, he discusses Rameau's nephew, so it's all connects. I mean, this miniseries is all, everything fits. It's not random. It's all. But one of the people from that milieu is the great Canadian philosopher Charles Taylor, who's a religious historian. And there's a letter here of Berlin writing to Charles Taylor when Charles Taylor was a PhD student. And guess who Berlin's, I think Taylor had two advisors. One was Berlin, and guess who the other one was? The other one was the woman in this book, Elizabeth Anscombe. So two giants. Imagine you're a young Charles Taylor. It's the early 60s. You're coming from Canada. You're studying at Oxford University, philosophy. And your teachers are Elizabeth Anscombe. And there's Isaiah Berlin. And that's who you, just, I don't know. I get excited about this stuff. You know, I'm weird. Okay, so what should we look at here? Bear with me. Oh, here's another little thing to Aileen. This is Friday, October 5th. Note we're in September and October in these letters, so it's another reason I chose it. He says, "Darling Aileen, whenever you feel depressed, sit down and write to me at once." At once is italicized. So he's writing a letter about, you must write a letter to me if you feel depressed. You will feel better, he's saying to her. So again, correspondence is not just beautiful, it's not just something to pass the time, but, you know, Isaiah Berlin says that we should correspond, we should write letters. And, you do it at once, it will be very good for both of us. I am grimly resolved not to go under. I am glad Philippe is to be operated on tomorrow, and a relief and nothing serious. I don't know what is a reference to. I don't know who that is. He's so connected to all these figures. He talks about a premiere of Stravinsky. So that's another thing about Isaiah Berlin. He's not only is he going to a premiere of a new work by Igor Stravinsky, he knows the conductor, and he, of course, I think he goes to a party of Stravinsky during when he's in the States. It's just something. Anyhow, that's I think that's interesting. A little more gossipy, more personal. This passage, before we'll get to the more abstract, impersonal stuff. I promise we'll get to that. I said I was going to get to ideas in the larger world, but I thought. He says, I dine with the old Schlesingers tonight, and that means the Schlesingers, Arthur Schlesinger Jr., if you know those names, and Senior. Tonight where Arthur was, he says, he was also very sweet. He reports that Adlai Stevenson freezes only to two persons in the world, the President of the United States and myself. So this is somebody flattering Berlin, or maybe not. Maybe he's saying, so Isaiah Berlin is writing to Aileen Berlin that Adlai Stevenson freezes when he's in front of John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy terrifies Adlai Stevenson, and Isaiah Berlin terrifies. I guess they're intimidated by these men. I don't know. What do you think? Doesn't intimidate me, but Adlai Stevenson thought so. I don't know. He says, how strange. He says, I am really, really fond of Arthur. I mean, Arthur Schlesinger. He is in a very difficult position, sniped at from all sides, and without dignity. His father, who is an exceedingly nice old man, and his mother, who is very sweet, both suffered deeply as a result. His children were there and were perfectly nice. His wife remained in Washington. So that's a veiled reference to, well, maybe not veiled to the people, to politics of the era. So maybe, I don't know, you've got a Goldwater thing, you've got George Wallace, you've got all this stuff going on in the South, you've got, I don't know, all kinds of things. Cuban Missing Crisis. We'll see here. He says, my God, is it dull here in another letter. Dull and depressing. Tonight, after hearing Kennedy's speech at 7 p.m., I'm on undergraduates here. So understand this. Older Isaiah Berlin is watching this in the undergrad dorm, like an undergrad dorm, Lowell House, watching JFK give a speech. They were silent and depressed. So imagine everybody being totally silent watching JFK speak. I think because the subject matter, you have to understand the Cuban Missile Crisis, Khrushchev, and it's all, He says he met with somebody who does not like New York. He says, I met some scholar, and I met, he says he hates New York. So. He says, I love New York. That's what Berlin writes. Unlike my friend, the scholar, I love New York. And I love you desperately, he says right after that. Really, this is fun. This is fun. He's apologizing to somebody else for not having read Iris Murdoch earlier. So he's saying, don't worry, I'll get to the Iris Murdoch. I'll read her, I know. So he's, He says here, if he could spend all day at Widener Library, he could. He says he lives in joy and peace in Widener Library. He's happy at Widener Library. So what are we going to talk about here? Here we go. Another speech from JFK. October 30th, 1962. I listened to the president's speech, surrounded by students in Lowell House. Reception was curious. Most of them were stunned. Someone started clapping at some particular sentiment of the president, but the rest stopped him. So somebody clapped, and then people stopped this guy from clapping. The reason is that they wanted to hear Kennedy speak. So it isn't that they didn't approve of clapping. They're like, don't clap, we want to hear. So they're hanging on every word of Jack Kennedy. Now, there's reasons for that. And one of the reasons is that Kennedy was a good, wrote. What I'm saying is that the people, we're talking about oratory that's just, beyond. We should go back and look at that stuff. It's remarkable. It's just, so part of it is just liking what he's saying, how he's saying it. There's that. He says, my cleaning woman asked me whether I thought there would be a war, and was much relieved to hear from me that there wouldn't. So he's playing prophet, and he's saying, this Cuban Missile Crisis, there won't be a war, don't worry, we're not going to. He's saying that to her. Most people feel that the president, in quotes, had to do something. But nobody knows if what he did was right, how it would come out. there is neither confidence or lack of confidence. Somewhat like England on the eve of the Suez Canal, but without the Labour Party. It's a little joke. He always puts in these inside references. Oh, I don't know. There's so much here. How about a letter to Jacqueline Kennedy? Do you want to hear how he writes to Jacqueline Kennedy, the First Lady? Wife of John F. Kennedy? Now, he's staying at the Ritz-Carlton Boston because I think he's headed back to England. I don't know. Maybe he got sick of the law house, the dorm, the university housing, and wanted to, who knows? I don't know, that's funny. Here we go here. Dear Mrs. Kennedy, Aileen and I are very grateful indeed. It was the most memorable evening I have spent in this entire United States, and, with one exception, anywhere else. Do you know what that exception was? He doesn't say. So the exception, of course, is the evening he spent with the Russian poet Anna Akhmatova in Leningrad 17 years later. So earlier. So I haven't really discussed a lot his meeting with Anna Akhmatova, the Russian poet and mystic. But that meeting with her was a consciousness-changing, mind-altering experience for him. And I think that, too, played a role in his ideas about Romanticism. And that, you know, you want to look up Akhmatova, you can. Interesting woman, interesting thinker. But he's giving really great praise to it because he's saying this is as good. He's saying this is as good as that. You know. I must apologize for talking so much, so rapidly, probably such nonsense. But it is something which, when in seventh heaven, I cannot arrest. But I hope you will forgive me all the same. I should have exercised more British restraint. Love this. Just so good. We wanted to exercise British restraint. I must also confess at once that after vainly trying to preserve the fragment of porcelain with which you rewarded me, I gave it to Marion Schlesinger. Marion Schlesinger was then the wife of Arthur Schlesinger, I guess. We just mentioned him. This is a world milieu. These are the Schlesingers and Joseph Alsop and McGeorge Bundy. I mean, these are Berlin was connected to the world. He was also, by the way, connected to the world of FDR. That's why I look forward to getting I'm not going to read all that too. I don't want to bore you. I hope this isn't. Is this boring? I hope this isn't. His correspondence to Franklin Roosevelt, and get to that. I hope this is not too interesting. Anyway, he gave this porcelain. He gave it to Marion Schlesinger, who asked for it. I found it painful to part with it, but more painful to refuse. I am very glad indeed, not merely on public grounds, but personally, that the heathen gods of old Japan should in fact not have been able to get the best of so mighty good a man as the president. He capitalizes president. So he's glad, right? I should have liked to serve him very much. Should have liked to serve him very much. I used to feel this about Franklin R. So he's writing to Jacqueline Kennedy about FDR. He calls him Franklin R. About whom we were ordered in the British Embassy. So remember, Berlin worked in the British Embassy. So interesting, right? I was ordered to be neutral in thought, word, and deed. But I was anything but. Meaning, I was ordered to be neutral, but I'm pro-FDR, I'm pro-New Deal. He refused to be neutral. He says, this New Deal is a good thing. You know? That's how he was not neutral. What is it? You can't be neutral on a moving train, Howard Zinn? I don't know. That connects, but interesting. Perhaps I am a natural hero worshiper and at the feet sitter. but this is the second occasion only in which I have felt a passionate desire to offer my services. So it's almost like he's saying, I want to be part of Camelot. Bring me, I want to be in the White House. That's really, I don't know. Offer my services however wanted to anyone. Isn't that interesting? So that's just Berlin writing to Jacqueline Kennedy. Should I read? I don't know. This is there's a lot here. Should I stop now and save some for another episode? It's a lot to read. Well, yeah, I think I'll hold on. Let me bear with me. I'm gonna so much here. Oh, I know I'm going to read Charles. So, note to self: I'm going to read from the Charles Taylor letter. I'm trying to find the moment. Where are we here? So this is from a letter. Again, there's so much to consider. This is an excerpt from, his letters are very long, and they go on for several pages. And so I can't read all of them, but excerpts of them. This is just Sir George Schulte. George Schulte. Of course, if you know your classical music history, George Schulte, Chicago. Think of Chicago Symphony. There's a little thing here about music. Oh. Where are we here? He's talking about Moses and Aaron. Schoenberg's Moses and Aaron. He also discusses Rigoletto, and there's a long discussion of opera. He says no baritone singer, I am sure, wants to remain Papageno, Liparella, even Falstaff, Iago, Figaro only. So that's a reference to, in the end, I suppose it is a matter of training and discipline, which we haven't yet established in this country. He's back in England, so he's interesting. He's writing to an American conductor, music director, and he's saying, you guys are you guys have one up on us in this particular department. Something, I don't know, something about the quality of baritones. I don't know, it's an opinion, but maybe he's just flattering Sir George Schulte. I don't know, really. I really don't know. And then he talks about the Schoenbergians, the atonalists in music. He says, I think the Schoenbergians, after Arnold Schoenberg, will be prepared to help with. He says they are as near to a fanatical musical sect as we have in these days, as the Wagnerians or the Brahmsians were before them. So he's saying they're kind of fanatical, like the Wagnerians and the Brahmsians. And their help should on no account be scorned. In short, I think that the right mood for the work could probably be by perfectly legitimate and honorable means created. So he's kind of, what he's discussing there is how do we get this atonal music, or 12-tone music, I don't know, get it more into the public, or get less, try to sort of loosen the resistance to it, I think. He says, moreover, since it is not the kind of work that would enter the repertory, even in the sense perhaps that Wozzeck has, that's Abendberg's opera Wozzeck, it would be a pity if our performances disappeared into oblivion or became mere respectable memories. I am sure that records could be made of so authoritative a kind that these performances and these records would become the classical exposition of Schoenberg at his most ambitious and profound. In this sense, I do not see why the impact should be so cumulative and great. If this were done, you would surely and deservedly become a great opener of gates. No first-class performance of this work, so far as I know, has been performed in a great opera house. If Schoenberg even begins to be what his most passionate followers claim for him, there is surely a case for so permanent and conspicuous a service to music as the identification of Covent Garden and yourself with a magnificent exposition of this new chapter in the history of opera. That's a sentence. That's a quote, right? Whew. He goes on. Let's taste of him writing to Sir George Salting. Oh, boy, are we here? I don't know. I think I want to save some for another episode. I think so. I'm tempted to do so. We'll conclude. Of course, the Romanticism lectures are in 64, 65. There's a lot of discussion of Kennedy and Goldwater, of course. Worries about Goldwater. He's saying Goldwater's not going to win, but he's getting too many votes, more votes than I would hope. There's a letter to Mary McCarthy, who we've discussed about, as you know, Berlin and Hannah Arendt were foes, but Berlin, ever the peacemaker, harmonious peacemaker, he's friends with Mary McCarthy. Writing her letters. Interesting, right? What do I take from all of this? All these letters. What does it all mean? What am I gleaning from it? Well, maybe this. We have language, we have prose, we have sentences, we have paragraphs, we have syntax, and maybe we can make it a point. I never want to give advice, or to actually maybe once in a great while, write something to somebody, anybody, and try to not only write what we feel or to reveal anything, but to try to write something, well, that's beautiful and well written, maybe. Why not? Just once a year. Or it's not a that's kind of I'm going to end with that. We'll talk, plenty of time in this series to talk about Charles Taylor and debates about freedom of the will and determinism and what Romanticism is. We never got to Vico, Hamann, and Herder. We will, hopefully. We'll talk about them. But I think I'm going to wish everybody here a great weekend. You can have long weekend, if it is for you. And thank you.